and welcome to the 9th and penultimate episode of this run of the Norwalk Film Festival Podcast. I am Sean Fox, one of the volunteer board members of the festival. Thanks for joining me and listening or watching through all these episodes so far. This interview series is to help share the stories of our filmmakers before our festival kicks off so that you can get to know them a little bit before seeing their films in person. Today's interview is with Devany Greenwood, the writer and director of Into the Thicket. In Into the Thicket, a young woman struggles with her fractured home life, failing to find common ground with her volatile yet emotionally repressed mother. Longing for a maternal figure, she continues to be haunted by visions of a mystical woman, and soon, dreams intertwine with reality as she discovers a deeper connection to the mysterious lady in the woods. Into the Thicket is a great film that blends fantasy world with main characters' everyday life and reality. And Devany now lives in Los Angeles, but she grew up in Connecticut, and we're excited to host her film as part of our festival. The festival has, as you probably know by now, 2 full days of programming, with screenings at the historic Wall Street Theater, mixers and panels at the Norwalk Public Library, and an opening night party at the 314 Beer Garden in South Norwalk on Friday night, the 19th. All right, without any further ado, here's my interview with Devany about her film, Into the Thicket. All right, we are joined by Devany Greenwood, the writer and director of Into the Thicket. Devany, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
I just want to say I really loved your film. It's a beautiful film, and it's so well acted and well written that it's a complete package. It's a lot of and yeah, so it was great to watch. And then I saw this is your first real dive into writing and directing a film. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, so it's weird. I have written and directed something before. When I went to NIFA, I did like an accelerated 8-week filmmaking workshop. Oh, okay. But it was, I don't even count that film as being, it exists on IMDb. So by like strict technicality, this is my second film, but it's my first.
Okay.
The other film, like we shot on a Canon 5D. There was no lighting equipment, broken sound equipment, and it was a 2-person crew and no budget. So this one is an actual budget, actual crew. So we had
that's great. Yeah, sounds. I mean, I have a whole YouTube page that I hope nobody ever finds, like videos that are made with friends and stuff. Where
they should really
technically filmmaking, but
they should really tell you in film school, like not be careful what you put on IMDb.
It's gonna be on your permanent IMDb record forever.
There's no going back once you press submit.
Yeah. So what do you feel like you learned? I mean, it's maybe jumping to the end a little bit after, since we're at the end of the process, but what did you learn from your first real directorial debut?
A lot. This was a really ambitious film. You can't really tell from it, but we shot in the high desert in California. We went like literally in the middle of nowhere, found this, I call it like just a bunch of pile of stones, barely kept together to create this kind of like stone cottage that had bullet shells and broken beer bottle glasses stick out. It was like an absolute hazard, and so we went and we had to like clean it up, and we turned that into the witch cottage that you see in the first scene, which was incredible because in LA you unless you have the money to be able to go on stage and properly do it, you're not really going to find that aesthetic.
No. So you got to find a bullet-ridden place.
Literally, like this place was insane. And when I show people pictures of what it looked like before, they can't even believe it. So that was actually the cheapest part of production. We had to drive up to I wanted to shoot this originally in Oxbow Regional Park, which is right outside of Portland, Oregon, but budget constraints. So the trouble was finding like a lush forest around Los Angeles, which is very difficult. And we settled on there's a forest in Big Sur, So we had to shuttle everyone up there overnight and hike deep into the woods. My poor crew, it really was like athletic. That's like we were running back and forth between, shooting on location in the forest, and the truck was parked on Route 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We couldn't put any of the equipment on the ground because then they would charge us a second monitor. So really absolute guerrilla filmmaking. So yeah, it was ambitious, with such an ambitious shoot. Even if you have like a regular shoot that's not as crazy as like, hey, let's shoot all over the freaking state. You're gonna learn a lot of things. I learned a lot of so much, honestly. As soon as we wrapped, I was like, I'm ready to make a second one to fix the mistakes I made in the first.
Yeah. I mean, that's the important thing, right? You learn from what you did.
Yeah.
As long as you're learning from those mistakes, then that's
what I will say is that one thing I didn't learn is I wouldn't necessarily, and I know a lot of people would think I'm crazy, I wouldn't scale back on the production. And something I did produce this basically on my own. And one thing that I really would like to do going in our next project is to bring on more producers to help, because it's a lot. But I think there's something to be said about having like a vision and just standing by it. Like there's so many things that we do that we cut out due to budgetary constraints. But it just, for me, it was like, then what's the point? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I'm going to do it, I want to like balls to the walls, like go all out. I do want to go to Mixer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes through, and it doesn't feel like you skimped on anything, because those visuals in the forest are just so like, it's fairy-like, and just like, it's just an amazing location. And I think obviously not having the vision that was originally in your head, I think it came through.
Good. I'm glad.
So speaking of your original vision, you describe your writing as poetic, and that certainly comes through in the film. But how do you take that? Like, what is your process for taking that idea out of your head and putting it on the paper?
So this, I feel like it needs to be said, this film is actually a proof of concept for a feature. So I know lots of people make a proof of concept and then develop a feature script afterwards. I did the exact opposite.
That was one of my later questions.
Yeah. So I wrote this feature script at the beginning of COVID, and I felt it's very complicated because it is kind of a love letter to poetry, which is I have a BFA in poetry, so that's always going to be my first love. I feel like whatever medium I choose to express myself in, it's always going to come out in this kind of poetic way, just because that's just so integral to the way that I express myself. But yeah, it was difficult to condense this into a proof of concept, because the feature literally spans from Elowen's childhood to her turning 18. And there's a lot, it is a coming of age story. There's a lot of different themes, a lot of different, subplots. But I was, when I was thinking about how do I go about making a proof of concept for this? And narratively speaking, I think a lot of people will watch Into the Thicket, the short, and just not, I don't know if they'll necessarily pick up on it. It feels like it does feel very abstract in a way. It's not based in like a very specific narrative like most short films are structured. I was more interested in introducing atmosphere, introducing these characters' universe, introducing this kind of magic, and also this darkness, and contrasting those two things. So I feel like, in a way, it does feel like visual poetry to me, because it's not so reliant on a narrative structure that we're used to, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it works really well, the magical elements for the real life things. But there is that contrast between her home life in this drab, kind of basic apartment, versus she's outside in this beautiful, airy, fairy-like forest. And can you tell us a little bit about working with your DP? Tell us a little bit about your DP, Naomi Armiger. Seems very accomplished and obviously did a great job. So just tell us a little bit about working with her.
Oh, she is just, I call her my creative soulmate. Like,
Why?
The thing is, I think that when you're telling a story, you have to find your creative soulmate. And first of all, she's from France, and this being my first film, I got into some arguments with one of my co-producers because he was like, you live in LA, like you can this phone and hit any DP. Why are you making things more complicated for yourself? And I was like, no, you don't understand. I can't tell this.
You're sticking to your vision.
Yeah, it was like this is the person I need to tell the story with. And honestly, it's a film made with so much love because we made it together. And indie filmmaking, like I said, riddled with problem after problem after problem. We did have our setbacks on set while we're shooting this. And when everything feels like it's on fire, I knew that I could just depend on her always to always like do everything in her might to keep the vision alive. And to have that level of trust, I feel like it's very rare, especially starting out. So I feel like I hit the jackpot, the lottery with finding her. And the way that we found each other is she actually read the feature script like a year and a half before I even thought about shooting a proof of concept. And she was basically signed on for it. She's like, whenever this gets made, I want to shoot it. And I never considered the thought of even being able to bring her out here. But at the end of the day, like it needed to be done. And she's so talented. And her background is in acting, which is really strange. I've never met a DP that has a background in acting.
Right. Usually those two very divergent paths.
Yeah. But it's really remarkable because it brings a certain sensitivity. Like her acting background brings a certain sensitivity and sensibility to the way that she frames narratives.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the script get in her hands?
I think it was because I posted on this Facebook group about the film, and she responded to it, and I don't know. It's been so long. It was one of those serendipitous, like, thank you internet for bringing us together. And she's actually going to be DPing my next project. So
that's great. What once again, kind of jumping ahead, but what do you want to talk about the next project, or is that still just
sure?
Kind of in the ether?
Yeah, it's called Ex Memoria, and we are trying to shoot it at the end of this year.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's just depends on the funding situation, but we're gonna go ahead and just assume that we're shooting.
Yeah.
It's short horror psychological drama. It deals with some heavier subjects like sexual abuse and PTSD. But yeah, I'm really interested in kind of like unraveling trauma in my work. And so Into the Thicket is one aspect of like childhood trauma. And so Ex Memoria is going to be another aspect of childhood trauma. Just a very different genre.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. If it's anywhere near as good as this one, it'll be another delight to watch. Well, heavy, but it'll be a well-made and good film. One thing I noticed in the opening scene in the witch's cottage, it is one of the problems you often run into with indie film is props, and some of those smaller details get left by the wayside. And that first scene is just so intricate and full of like so many little details and stuff. And then I read and saw that you work in costumes and props. So is that something that you really wanted to focus on in here in making this film?
100% that is attributed to our incredible production designer, Stephanie. Like she first of all, she's a real life witch. Like she at our rap party, she was doing like freaking, astrology readings for the entire crew. It's just, most of that stuff is either from her own home or from a friend's home. So
she just made that shack in the woods, or that stone cabin in the woods, look like her apartment.
Literally, yeah. And we couldn't. But I mean, when I walked in there and I saw it, it was such a cramped space too. Like as the director, I wasn't even able to fit into it while they were preparing, like setting up the camera and setting up the room. I would be able to like pop in for a second, and I felt like a kid in a toy store. What the? Because like she pulled this vision out of my mind, like there's only so much as a director that I can do to describe what the vision is, but it's like another level when you're working with someone who just, it feels like they were privy to some intimate thoughts in your mind.
How did you get in my brain?
And she freaking killed it. Like really, like it felt magical, and it felt like the parts of my childhood that inspired Ava, this witchy lady, and like the witch cottage and all this magic in the forest. It really felt like a beautiful tribute to that, because I felt like a child almost on my own set, So yeah, and there of course I work in costumes and props, so definitely it's important. It's tough though, because that does tend to be the thing that gets neglected the most on lower budget productions, because like we didn't have a prop master. It hurt us in the forest. Like she wasn't there in the forest, unfortunately. So I was basically the prop master as well. And I forgot a ton of shit, let me tell you. There's a scene, I won't spoil anything, in the woods where there might be some kind of ritual going on. And we were supposed to have a ton of other things. And it was in that moment where I was like, we're screwed now. So.
Well, I'll tell you, I did not notice. So
good.
So it's going to be pulled it off.
The lesson being, make sure you get a prop master and a good production designer and a good art department team.
Yeah, I mean, it's those things that it makes a difference in the long run, and it really helps amp up that production value overall and make your project that much better.
Yeah.
Lastly, I mean, it's kind of coming full circle. You're originally from Connecticut, and now in Los Angeles. Just can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up out there, and where you hope to go from here?
Yeah, it's a crazy journey. Yeah, I'm from Avon originally, and I went to University of Maine up in Farmington. That's where I got the BFA in poetry. But I always wanted to pursue filmmaking, but I just never thought like, I shouldn't do it. It's not gonna go anywhere, the awful things. And then of course I go and study poetry, like that went anywhere. But anyway, after getting that degree, I moved around quite a bit, but I was working, retail jobs, like nothing really inspiring. And I did end up moving out to LA back in 2015. But that was just kind of to follow my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being a costume designer. And ironically, she was the costume designer on our film. So, circle moment.
Got to call in all the favors you can.
Yeah. But I got into a really bad car accident about 2 weeks after moving out here. Like I drove cross country and was like, I made it. And then I couldn't even make it 2 weeks without getting and that's LA drivers for you. Anyways, I totaled my car, had 2 torn shoulders, basically couldn't get out of bed for months. And I didn't get off on the right foot, so it was a struggle. I struggled for a year in LA and eventually hit like a breaking point. And I was like, this is not working. So I moved to Boston, took a job as merchandise manager at Barnes & Noble in the Prudential Center. So I was there for about a little bit over a year. And was very unhappy, not necessarily at Barnes & Noble, but just like that feeling that you get when you're not doing the thing that you want to do. And
yeah,
I remember I was in therapy and my therapist was like, well, what do you want to, is she like aggressive? She was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, and she's like, then freaking go and do it. And I was like, you know what? It sounds like such a simple thing, but we're trained to say no to ourselves. It's so much easier to say, no, I can't do that than just go and do it. And so I settled on the car accident lawsuit and I took what small amount of money I had. And I was like, I'm going to put this into moving back to LA. And I enrolled in that 8-week filmmaking workshop at NFF. And shortly after finishing that, I got the job at Global Effects. That's where I work. It's my day job in specialty costumes and props. And I've been doing it since. Like it's really great. I feel really blessed because I get to, be involved in the industry in my day job. I get to be obviously involved in my passions in writing and directing. And I also AD on the side as well. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. I've been here since 2018 or 2019. I can't remember. It's all a blur.
I know it's all a blur. It's certainly, yeah. Well, it's great. I think that, as you said, it's a good lesson in reminding yourself that you don't have to say no to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's something, that a lot of people, it's easier to say no.
It is, yeah.
And I think as you're doing with your next short, you say like we're saying we're doing it at the end of the year because that's how you got to keep talking about it. And if you talk about it, you're going to do it.
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. I have to. My favorite question to ask at the end of these is, if you had one, or if you were able to think of one, what would be your dream project to work on outside of the feature you've already written? Because you've done that. But if you were like, I want to work with Nicolas Cage and I want to make whatever, it's a very on the spot to think.
You know what I always say? If I could just work on a Greta Gerwig production, I don't care what role, I will literally be her like personal coffee person to go get whatever errands she needs. Like she just
coffee holder. You don't go anywhere. You just hold it.
Exactly. Anything, because the way she runs her sets is so beautiful. Like the culture that she creates and the environment, you can tell from every film that she does and every set that she runs that it is. And a lot of people say like, we're like a big family, but then like it's just complete chaos on set. But like there really is a sense of, familial love there that she cultivates. And that's something that I also strive for. And I hope that with every, set that I run, I get closer and closer to that and less away from indie chaos.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like you just want everyone to be their best selves. This is filmmaking. At the heart of it is collaboration, and you should. I really feel that in order to make your piece the best it can possibly be, we all need to come together and collaborate in a really sincere and genuine way.
Yeah. And if you're creating an environment where people are having fun and they like working with you, and then they're going to give their all for you, and they're going to do their best to make it the best project.
It's a tapestry. It's not my you know what I mean? It's
sure.
We're all contributing. So
I mean, it's such an industry where, as you're saying, like if you end up skimping on whatever on certain things, that like it eventually shows up, and like that you. It takes a village. It's a tapestry. It is so like every little person matters on set. So,
and that's what I love about it most. That's what makes it so beautiful and appealing.
Yeah, I have to agree. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Devany. It was really lovely chatting with you, and looking forward to seeing your next short, and eventually your feature film. Thanks again to Devany for joining me. Into the Thicket plus 60 other films are part of a great lineup at this year's festival. We have one more interview in this podcast series leading up to the festival, and I've had a great time getting to know some of our filmmakers a little bit better and helping share their stories with you all. The festival's so close, and we're really, really excited to see you all January 19th through the 21st. Visit our website, norwalkfilmfestival.org, for all ticketing info, schedules, and more. We are an entirely volunteer-run organization. Couldn't do it without you. Help us spread the word by following us on all the social media platforms of the handle @Norwalk Film Festival. There you get all the up-to-date details on everything happening at the festival and continue to be sure. Thanks for listening and look forward to seeing your results.